Free Guy is the equivalent of taking Deadpool and Ready Player One and putting them together in a blender, or making a sandwich out of them, or making an ice cream sandwich out of them. I just really want an ice cream sandwich now. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're diving right into my review of Free Guy. Thank you so much to 20th Century Studios for giving me the chance to dive into this film early in person. It hits theaters August 13th, so this is an early review. It's directed by Shawn Levy, who did direct some of Stranger Things, and it stars Ryan Reynolds, Jodie Comer, Howery, Keery, and the man himself, Taika Waititi. Now, there definitely are some more names here that we're going to talk about, and I'll get into what works and what didn't work. But before we do that, guys, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I talk about movies early like this all the time, so you're not going to want to miss out. Go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, guys, so you'll be the first one in the comments, and hit the thumbs up button if you're a fan of Ryan Reynolds or Jodie Comer, Howery. You see where I'm going with this. Now, the story itself is pretty basic. It surrounds a bank teller named Guy. He's a background player in a video game and recognizes that he's in a video game and has to save his world before it's too late, so he becomes a fully realized AI. And I think the story itself is not the strongest part of the film. It's really the cast. But you know what? Let's get into what works with Free Guy, because again, I came into this film with low expectations. I did not expect anything from this movie, and I'm not gonna lie, the trailers didn't sell me. But I'm happy to say that I was so surprised at how much of a decent comedy it was for the summer. The movie itself really does take a generic story and allows the charisma of its cast to elevate the film, and that's the strongest thing about this movie, is just the actors on screen. Because the story itself, guys, is not very engaging. It's really about all the relationships formed on screen, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and I was also really surprised by the third act having as much heart as it did. But hey, that speaks so much to the actors themselves. And also, if you do like Ready Player One and you enjoy the humor of Deadpool, I think this would be a great marriage for you. There's a lot of callbacks to other video games and pop culture references, and I do like what they did by adding in some Easter eggs in the background. It was just a joy for a video game fan such as myself. But okay, let's get right into the cast now, because we need to talk about them. It's really not the script or the direction here that works for me. It really is this ensemble cast. Ryan Reynolds leads the way as Guy, an NPC that comes to realize he's in a video game world and can save it before it's too late. Now, after so many years, I've come to realize that Ryan Reynolds really is just aiming for the moon with every single line. I mean, everything is a punchline. Every bit of dialogue his character has in this movie is him trying to be funny. There are some moments where he comes down to earth a little bit, but for the most part, it's just him swinging for the fences. It can get exhausting sometimes, yes, but I'm not gonna lie, I actually found him funnier and much more tolerable than in both Deadpool movies, because I am not the biggest fan of Deadpool 1 and 2, but here I did find his comedy to be a little bit more effective for me. But honestly, he works the best with Jodie Comer, who plays two roles: Millie, a video game developer, and Molotov Girl, the playable character who teams up with Guy in this open world video game. And speaking of Jodie Comer, guys, she gives the absolute best performance in the film, and she was the scene stealer for me. Not only is she funny, but she also brings the heart and soul this film desperately needed. There's only so much comedy that works in Free Guy anyway, but Jodie Comer is the breath of fresh air in between all of the humor. And outside of this video game world, Free City, I do like the fact that we get this relationship formed between Keys, who's played by Keery, and Millie herself. So Jodie Comer, Keery, I like both of them anyway, but when you pair both of them up together in this film, they deliver some of the funniest moments of the entire movie. It's also really good to see Keery be able to ground the film in certain moments as well, especially in that third act. And since we're already on the topic of duos, can we please talk about Howery and Ryan Reynolds? I really liked both of them together. Howery plays Buddy, a bank security guard and Guy's best friend, but both of them have amazing chemistry. And I like that these two have nonchalant conversations in the middle of bank heist, or they just really don't try to be funny and they already are humorous. So I just enjoy their delivery here. Their chemistry is great, and honestly, Howery is a good actor. I just think that he's been taking some weird roles lately, but in this film, at least he has a little bit of a layer to his character. He's not one-dimensional. But I do think on the surface, Free Guy is going to be that one movie this year that has an insane amount of Easter eggs, cameos, and references to video games and pop culture. Now, I know Space Jam: A New Legacy had a ton of Easter eggs in the background and all over the film, but Free Guy does it in a more subtle way, and it's not as obvious, so for me, it worked much better in Free Guy than it did in Space Jam 2. Basically, think of Ready Player One without the solid storyline and much more humor, and you'll get this film. I also loved seeing some obvious Easter eggs in the background and some that weren't as obvious that only video game fans will understand. But when it comes to cameos, guys, really keep your eyes peeled, because there are some moments that are just so surprisingly funny. And then there's one cameo, my favorite cameo in the entire film, that is so heartwarming, and it comes in the middle of the movie where there's this montage and you start to see cool Easter eggs and some cameos. It was just so surprising, and it made our entire theater just, oof, we were both happy and sad. So when you see it, I think you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, but I really enjoyed a lot of the cameos in this film. And when it comes to the Easter eggs and the cameos, guys, I think it was all executed pretty well, and at no point did I ever feel like this is just IP overload at some points. There's even a very specific moment in the third act with Guy that, well, it made me smile and it made me laugh, probably because I was just incredibly surprised that they pulled it off. But then you remember 20th Century Studios is owned by another big company. That's all I'll say about that. So we have some good performances here, some awesome Easter eggs, and a decent amount of comedy. But for what it's worth, guys, Free Guy has a lot of faults. And that really does come via the comedy in the film, because it doesn't always hit the mark. There's a lot of misfires in this movie, and for me, there were long stretches of time where I just wasn't laughing. And that's because the film is always hitting you over the head with punchline after punchline, and it's like the writers were just throwing darts at a board and hoping to just hit the bullseye. But again, I think most of the jokes that were laugh out loud funny were genuinely funny, but then there were some things in between where, I mean, they were just throwaway lines. Like, you need to be able to break up the humor in a movie, and I think here it doesn't do that very well. And there were some setups here that had very little payoff, and a lot of that is found in the first half, because that is the part of the movie that is very hit and miss. It just doesn't help that there's some weird and unbalanced writing too once we get introduced to events outside of this video game. Basically everything inside of this fictitious video game studio was not very entertaining. Honestly, it wasn't even interesting. To me, this was the part of the film that really failed, and not even a good actor and comedian like Utkarsh and Bukhar could save the day. He is so good, but I just don't think he gets enough screen time in this film. There's just not enough substance to help keep this movie afloat when we're not inside the video game. And I also really didn't enjoy that the movie went for low-hanging fruit when it comes to jokes about gamers. There were definitely moments in this film where I understood they went the stereotypical route, especially with one specific running joke where there's this gamer who is eating Twizzlers and still living with his mother, but he's only 22 years old, so it's not unrealistic to think that he either just graduated college or maybe he's just enjoying his Saturday. But then they make another joke about a certain sock, and it's gross and also not representative of the gaming culture as a whole now. So I think that this movie almost feels like it was written 10 years ago in a way, because this joke did not land for me, and also I think it is just annoying. Again, I'm exhausted by a lot of these stereotypes at this point. And unfortunately, this was probably the one area of the film to me that was lazy, so I just really expected a little bit more from a script like this. Now, outside of the misfired humor and the lazy attempts at making fun of gaming culture, I do have to tell you that the biggest drawback in this film comes from one performance, and unfortunately it's from an actor I absolutely love, and that's Taika Waititi. That pains my heart to say it, but unfortunately he is the worst part about this film. And I'll say it again, guys, I love Taika Waititi as a director, as a writer, and as an actor. He's funny, and honestly he has a knack for comedy, but here in Free Guy, he just doesn't work for me. He plays our antagonist here, Antoine, and he's supposed to be this jerk CEO who's also a dork, but the problem is I don't think Taika balances both characterizations very well. He either needs to be a total jerk without trying to be a dork, because there are moments where a lot of his dialogue is very forced. His character is completely exhausting, and honestly we do get a heavy dosage of Antoine, and he doesn't bring many laughs or even many reactions at all. Instead, I was just questioning why they wrote his character this way and why Taika never seemed to fit. And let me be honest, Antoine as an antagonist is as one-dimensional as it gets. There's no layers to him at all. There's no arc for his character. He's just evil to be evil. And honestly, I really wanted Taika Waititi to work in this film because I smiled when he first appeared, but it was all downhill from there. And before we get into my overall thoughts, guys, there's just one more thing, and that's the fact that scenes in Free Guy tend to overstay their welcome. While I love the cameos here, there are just some moments where a cameo can tend to overshadow the rest of a scene and just drag it out for far too long. There's one scene in particular right at the beginning of the third act, and I'm not going to spoil who the cameo is and what they did in this scene, but for the first 3 minutes I was really laughing. I thought it was a joy to see this actor on screen because we know that he's capable of being a comedian, but then it just simply stays on screen for far too long, and then you get into 3 or 4 more minutes of this shtick and it just doesn't work. So it almost feels like the script gets in its own way sometimes. And honestly, I didn't think the movie needed to be nearly 2 hours, guys. There's a lot of fluff here, and the movie ended up feeling long by the third act. And that's the thing, in the last quarter of this film, I kept thinking to myself, why is this film as long as it is? And it almost feels like there are moments, especially in the middle of the movie, where we could have done without, or maybe just trimmed off the fat around the edges, and it would have made for a tighter movie that maybe had more staying power than it really did. So overall, Free Guy is one of those films where if you come in with low expectations, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But if you're coming in expecting something as great as Deadpool, now listen again, I'm not a Deadpool fan, but I know some people are, I think you'll be disappointed. There are a lot of jokes here that don't land, and unfortunately the script is very lazy in many moments, and I did not really think that a lot of the film in the first half worked as well as it did in the second half. Do we have some really good performances? Absolutely. Jodie Comer, Ryan Reynolds, Keery, and even Lil Ray Howery put on really good to really great performances. But then you have Taika Waititi, who just bogs the film down, and it pains me to say that because he's amazing. He just did not work at all for me. So there are things here that work, but it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back for Free Guy. So I don't think it's a terrible film by any means. And was it fun? I think I did have some fun with it for sure. It's just a solid 3 out of 5 if I had to rate it, because the film itself has a good foundation where I think some of the movie finds its best footing in, which is inside the video game world, and Guy realizing he is an NPC. That's all fun, but then it's everything outside of the video game world that just doesn't work very well for me. So there you have it. That's my real review of Free Guy, a film that's a decent summer comedy, but I think by the end of the year might be a little forgettable. But hey, I need to know what you thought of the film, so go ahead and get loud down below. Let me know if you've seen it by this point, what you loved, what you didn't love, and hey, are you excited for the film? And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell for more reviews just like this. Alrighty, y'all, well, I'm gonna go and now reminisce over the cameos that we saw in this film and possibly shed a tear. Alrighty, again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening.